Good afternoon, colleagues. We will leave just 1 minute for people to join in the meeting, but we'll start after that minute, if you bear with us. Good afternoon, colleagues. Good morning, wherever you join from. Good evening, if you're right there in the East. Welcome to this event called Cities Beat the Heat, co-organized by the Global Cities Hub and the Red Cross and Red Crescent Climate Center. This event takes place in the lead up to the Heat Action Day that takes place every year on the 2nd of June, which is a global moment for raising awareness and sharing solutions around extreme heat. Just a few housekeeping matters to start with. So the event is being recorded. It will be made available on our website afterwards. It is only in English, but there's translated captioning available so that you may follow the meeting in your preferred language. And don't hesitate to use the Q&A available on Zoom to raise any questions and make comments during the event. We hope we'll have time to reply to some of them during the Q&A part in the second part of our event. So my name is Antu Duong. I am the co-director of the Global Cities Hub. For those who don't know us yet, we are an organization based in Geneva that pursues two objectives. First is to connect cities and regions to the United Nations in general, other international organizations, to enhance the influence of local and regional governments. And to do so, we encourage international organizations to work with cities and vice versa. And of course, states come in the loop. The second objective that we pursue is that we promote the urban on the agenda of the international community, because we all know it, our future is urban. So we want the international community to better take into account the phenomenon of urbanization in its work. And the Cities Beat the Heat event is part of that effort. When we look at climate change, extreme weather events, we want to make sure that an urban lens is applied and that we look at the specificities of the urban environment. And as you all know, cities are on the front line of responding to the climate crisis, especially when it comes to extreme heat. Cities are much warmer than their rural areas due to the urban heat island effect. And as urbanization accelerates, the number of people impacted by extreme heat increase. And we need to be aware of it, we need to understand the phenomenon, and we need to come up with very concrete solutions to that. So I'm very pleased again to co-host this meeting with the Red Cross and Red Crescent Climate Center, which supports the Red Cross and Red Crescent movement and its partners in reducing the impact of climate change and extreme weather events on vulnerable people. For this Womener, I've called it Womener because it's only women, we are joined by three outstanding women leaders, each offering unique insights on climate resilience, urban planning, and economic adaptation. And before handing over to our distinguished speakers, let me simply recall that next week in Geneva, there will be the Global Platform on Disaster Risk Reduction starting, and a special event on extreme heat is scheduled in plenary on the 5th of June with a lot of people. And I'd like to encourage you to participate in that event either online or in person if you will be coming to Geneva. And for those traveling to Geneva, there's a reward. We will be holding an in-person networking event for representatives of cities and regions and city networks attending the Global Platform on Disaster Risk Reduction. Invitations have been sent out. I hope you have received them if you're online, and we're looking forward to welcoming you in Geneva for that purpose next week. So let me start now with our webinar, and I'll start with Julie Ariki. Julie, you are the Director of Programs at the Red Cross and Red Crescent Climate Center. You lead the Climate Center's work on urban climate risk management, which includes a focus on urban heat risks. Given your very, recognized expertise, you've been selected as one of the lead author of the special report on climate change in cities of the IPCC, which is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, pretty famous. And you'll be focusing on chapter 3, which is dedicated to actions and solutions to reduce urban risks and emissions. And the report, we can't wait for that, will be published by March 2027. So still a few months to wait for that. You've been working on climate adaptation, risk management for almost 2 decades, and you've seen a lot about what is being done in cities, by cities, to address extreme heat. So I'd like to come up with one question. How do local governments, in your experience, manage heat waves? What immediate and long-term actions should they prioritize to manage urban heat risk effectively? That's the first question. And then maybe the second directly, so that you have time to respond to both of them. I know, the report will only be published in March 2027, the IPCC special report on climate change in cities. But if you could already give us a little bit of a preview of the upcoming report and how basically urban leaders will be able to use it in the future to advocate for national support, but also support at the international level, it would be great. Julie, you have the floor.
Great, thank you so much. And thank you for not only having me here, but organizing this event as well. So on your first question about the immediate and long-term priorities, first, I think one of the most critical is probably already being done by those who are here today, but recognizing that heat risk exists. And there's been huge progress in that over the past couple of decades as well. Also, that heat risk is on the rise and that it threatens human health, well-being, and a variety of other supportive systems. With that foundational recognition, then there's also going a bit deeper to understand who's vulnerable and how that vulnerability manifests. This can help ensure that heat risk messaging is inclusive and it's targeted, and it can help local governments and their partners to remove the really practical social financial barriers that might be preventing heat action at an individual or household level. So examples of what I mean by that would be things like labor protections or informality or housing, indoor heat risk, for example, the unhoused, et cetera. So really understanding that who is vulnerable and how that vulnerability uniquely shapes their actions in the day-to-day is really critical. The third thing I would say is what we've also seen a lot of growth in is scaling heat action plans and early warning systems. So this is the more immediate term, right? And I think this will be familiar to many people on the call. So on heat action plans, it's really making sure that they're also multi-sectoral, really covering that whole of society and the way that heat kind of has this pervasive set of impacts, but then also multi-stakeholder. So local government is critical in developing heat action plans and early warning systems, but so are civil society and academic partners, the private sector. And so really bringing that kind of whole of society approach into how they're developed. On the early warning system side, it's very similar, looking at the full chain of not only understanding the risk and monitoring for it, but also warning and providing the practical space for people to take actions based on those warnings. And that might involve a lot of collaboration with national governments, where we have seen a huge increase in heat early warning systems, but we also have further to go in that front. And in the context of both of those, it's also planning for the cascading and compounding risks, right? And the classic example for this, which will be familiar, is if a power outage occurs, it can have cascading impacts on health systems, food systems, et cetera. Another less common one would be to think of, for example, when other disasters occur, so a hurricane or a wildfire, and then if you have a heat wave following after that, when your systems are really eroded because of that first disaster, how will you, as a government, be able to provide that safety to people during the extreme heat event when that is a compounding factor? On the long term, of course, incorporating heat into urban planning and design, and we see that both in cities that are still growing and where future risk is mitigated by integrating heat risk concerns today, but also in cities that are already very well established and grown, retrofitting those sorts of heat risk mitigation options where possible. And we see a lot of this in terms of blue and green infrastructure, looking at building codes, passive cooling, social infrastructure, et cetera. And then the final one I would say on your first question is really addressing heat governance and policy needs. So we see a really strong need for clear ownership of managing heat risk across relevant departments, and that clear coordinating role that local governments are really well positioned to have. And in that governance and policy needs, looking at engaging communities in decision making, and again, bringing this sort of whole of society approach where you're thinking about not only the emergency phase or the long-term urban planning phase, but also social protection systems. How can your social protection systems be utilized to address vulnerability, or at a national level, disaster laws? And in some countries, heat isn't even categorized as a disaster, which limits the emergency funding opportunities. So at a really quick survey with some short and long-term perspectives. And we actually have a report that we're releasing on Monday next week on heat action data that goes into more depth on some of these things. So keep an eye out for that if you're interested in those topics. Then on the IPCC question, firstly, it's super exciting that this report is under development. It was already identified as a priority in the last assessment cycle, and now it's kicked off. And I know the fellow lead authors are really excited about being engaged in this process. The report has 5 key chapters, and they really outline the themes that will be covered in the report, of course. So the first is on sort of the foundational framing, context setting, et cetera. So that does outline that story of the report, talks about the sort of foundational considerations, like what is an urban system in the context of climate, and also how does it look in the context of climate change, urban vulnerabilities, how do local risks link to global risks, et cetera. And then the second of 5 chapters is around trends, challenges, and opportunities. So if you think about city-specific climate trends would be part of that, things like urbanization, urban development trends, urban emissions trends. What's interesting about this report is adaptation and emission are kind of woven together throughout. And then the third is actions and solutions, which you mentioned already. And that's, again, solutions for urban mitigation, for urban adaptation. It is considering Indigenous knowledge and local knowledge. How do you integrate these mitigation and adaptation priorities? What are the synergies? What are the trade-offs? And also importantly, what are the metrics to assess those options in terms of a variety of categories? And then the fourth chapter is how to facilitate and accelerate change. So that's where you can think about things like policies, education, financial instruments, political will and leadership. And so there'll be a whole chapter focused on that. And then the fifth and final is focused on sort of applying this into city types and regions. So solutions by city types and regions. So thinking about not only geographic regions, but development stage, informality, cities in fragile and conflict contexts, et cetera. And so that's really the quick overarch of the report. And I think, it's in terms of, to finalize with the third question that you had of how to sort of use it in the future, it's really not only using it as that sort of state of our knowledge on what works, where we still need to learn more, et cetera, but also keeping in mind that governments are the ones that ultimately commission this report and will be part of the sort of approval process of the summary for policymakers. And so that creates a fantastic opening to have this dialogue between local and national level about the priorities that are coming out in the report, what might be coming up for the regional sections in Chapter 5, for example, or the solutions by city type and regions. And how to then carry that forward into practical work at the local level.
Excellent. Thanks a lot for that, Julie. I think just to bounce back on what you said last, it is indeed a fantastic opportunity for deep dialogue between local and national governments on this question of climate change. So we're very much looking forward to this publication. I can only encourage, the IPCC to really organize that kind of dialogue, actually. So I'm not sure how it will work, but it would be great to keep in touch so that we know, whether there is that opportunity and, engage our constituency to basically engage with their national authorities on that subject. Thanks a lot for that. We'll move on to the next speaker and come back hopefully with questions and comments at the end. I want everyone to be able to get some initial time for initial presentation and then a bit of a discussion. But thanks for that, Julie. I'm turning now to Elizabeth Bargiani. You are the CHO, which stands for Chief Heat Officer of Athens, which was actually the first city in Europe to appoint a Chief Heat Officer back in 2021. So that's not such a long time ago. We all know Athens, of course, but it's one actually of the most densely built cities in Europe, and also one of the warmest cities, with a significant urban heat island effect. However, you also are considered as being one of the leaders in adapting, mitigating our warmer world. Several projects, initiatives have been taken over the years. I know you have an app that provide indication for people to use the coolest routes in Athens to go from point A to point B. You have created pocket parks a little bit everywhere in these very dense cities to enhance access to green spaces and shade, to also reinvigorate somehow the urban and social fabric of the city. And there's also a big project about renovating a Roman aqueduct to improve water supply in the city. So my question comes to that. What basically lessons have you learned as a city from implementing those urban cooling projects? Again, like the Cool Routes app or the pocket parks. What impact have you been able to measure on the communities and on heat resilience, basically? And then my second question is about how extreme heat, which is of course, increasing, how has it reshaped your vision for public space and urban design in Athens? I'll start with that, and if we have time, I'll go to the third question. But Elizabeth, you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me to this session. I'm really, really happy to be with you. I would like to say that Athens has an integrated policy regarding climate in general. And big part of it is heat. Heat has been recognized one of the greatest risks for the city of Athens. And we try to integrate our policies and our actions into each and every department of the city. So one big lesson that we've learned from actually publishing and actually doing the actions plans and the strategies that we have written is that we need to collaborate. We cannot do it by ourselves. We need to be horizontal in every and each aspect of what we do. Although heat through legislation, and I think in many cities it's similar, it's not owned by the city of Athens. It's we can do things by ourselves, and in our departments it's a much greater challenge, and we have to collaborate. We've worked with Kathy. We've worked together. We've categorized heat waves with the National Observatory of Athens. So we named the heat waves. We were the first city in Europe to do that. And now there is a system that will be applied into the meteo, let's say, the prediction forecast department. For example, we are doing part of this strategy. It has to do with the awareness, the preparedness, and the redesign of the city regarding the heat. And we are very much focused on making campaigns. We've made a website for the city of Athens, which is called Cool Athens, and it has advice for people regarding heat. We also have special measures when the heat wave comes for special groups of people, homeless, people who use drugs, for old people and lonely people, we operate open. We have some places that we call them cool centers, so people can go there that have energy poverty, and they can go and visit them and can rescue from the heat. But we also have big plans regarding redesigning the city and introducing the nature into the city. And this is the most permanent one, because bringing nature and water into the city is the factor that makes that brings happiness and brings normality into every person's life, and it does have to do with everybody, not just the city of Athens. So one thing that it has been exciting for us is that the last year we've also initiated the Energy Poverty Office for the city of Athens. And we run energy audits, and we also provide assistance, technical assistance to other to people who are energy poor, with the aim of providing more tools for those people. We will collaborate with a lot of businesses. We have the development agency of the city of Athens, who will be doing a lot of work regarding that. And this would
Sorry,
be
Elizabeth, I'm not sure I understood. You talked about energy poverty. Is that right? Not sure I understand.
Energy Poverty Office.
Okay. Sorry, I'm not sure I understand this concept. Can you explain again?
It's an office that it's open for the residents of the city of Athens. They can be registered as members, and they can get guidance and advice regarding their houses and the energy condition of their house.
Okay.
And they can do energy audits through our consultants in the houses, with the potential of getting funding regarding solutions in order to make them more livable in heat
Okay.
waves.
Clear. Thank you, Elizabeth. Very clear. Very innovative, actually. It's the first time I hear about this.
It's the first, we're just celebrating the first year of operating this office. And actually, it's right back to me. I'm very close to it right now. So that's a lot of effort put into that, and we will also try to incorporate more things into this office and include more cooperations, let's say, with NGOs, citizens, and businesses. What is really important in terms of awareness that we've done is also the climate story of the city of Athens, which was done through a European program which is called Reach Out. And it shows a lot of scientific data, because that they were produced through the program, the projections, the expectations, but also what the city of Athens is doing in a concise way through a story, through a storytelling attitude. So this has been quite useful for us, because when we were presenting it to some events or some presentations that we were doing, a lot of schools have asked for it in order to promote their awareness. And we found this a very extremely useful tool. And last thing but not least, I would like to say some things about the things that we do regarding the big projects that we are doing. You did talk about the aqueduct. It's a collaboration of a lot of municipalities, not just the city of Athens, but the actual point is the city center of Athens. And this water, it's a Roman aqueduct, and we will be using this water in order to create cool routes, a metropolitan green route, let's say, coming from the mountains, North Mountains of Greece, of Athens, into the center. That's the ambition. And part of the water will be used in order to for cooling solutions, and also irrigation and cleaning of its municipality. I think that's a very, very innovative, and I'm really looking forward to this to materialize and get mature and materialize in the few years coming. And we also have a project called Cooling Havens. It's an EUI, an urban European urban initiative project that will create 5 spaces in the city of Athens with public participation, with schools, with monitoring, with measuring in the city of Athens, and we rediscover the water in the city of Athens, either for with water management techniques, or with bringing water in order to, up into the surface in order to cool down the public space of the city of Athens. So this is just started, and you'll be hearing from us about these projects.
Great, thank you, Elizabeth. I know you're on the phone at the moment, but if you could maybe in the chat put a few links, if you have them, to the different projects that you mentioned, the storytelling about heat, and also the last one. I think it would be useful for participants, if you can. Otherwise, we'll make the follow-up afterwards, and we'll forward that information to the audience. Thanks a lot for that. Super, super useful to know about all the different projects that you're running. I would take it that indeed the impact measurement that you've led has been positive with regard to the cool routes and the pocket parks. I guess you got very positive feedback from the population, have you? Or you haven't, you haven't gone through that evaluation process yet?
I think we get evaluated by a set of measures. It's not just the pocket parks. For example, we did run a mini forest that cools down. We try to create the biggest strategies to create green spaces and bring nature into the city, and actually manage in such a way that we create cool public spaces. So yes, we do have positive feedback. Is that what from all the consultations that we've done? We've initiated the climate forum for the city of Athens. We have a committee for young people regarding climate, and we consult with those things. And of course, first of all, we also have now a deputy mayor for climate governance and social economy, which Mr. Chrysogelos, who has set it up all. So it goes through a lot of public consultations, and it's what people want. We see this from every public participation and every project that we do. That's what the Athenians need and want. It's a verification, because when we do it, we actually come to the same conclusion.
But it's great that it's not only about climate, but it's also about public participation. You basically really link those two things.
Very, very much so, very much so. And what is a challenge now for the city of Athens, and is the let's say the wedding between accessibility and greening spaces, because we have a lot of we have a huge traffic problem in the city of Athens, a lot of cars. You said it's a densely populated city, it's a densely built city with a lot of cars and a lot of disconnected green spaces. So the idea is how to unify them, how people can have accessible, all people have access to it, no matter on their, if they're disabled, if they have any disabilities. So this is a main goal, and we want to consult. For example, now we are doing the urban accessibility plan of the city of Athens, which also includes issues regarding the green spaces. And it's a big challenge to make our spaces, our roads, our streets, green corridors for the city of Athens. And that is not always easy by removing cars, because you need to be efficient and innovative on how to do that. Because that's why it needs strategy.
We have the same problem here in Geneva, you know, people fighting over putting trees in the street versus removing cars. So we know about it. Thank you so much, Elisabeth, for that. Fantastic to better understand basically all those different strategies and how they link up together in the city of Athens to basically bring back nature and water into the city. Let me now turn to Kathy Boffman-McLeod as our last speaker, and then we have hopefully a bit of time to engage. Kathy, you are the founder and CEO of Climate Resilience for All, which is a gender-focused NGO dedicated to protecting the health and livelihoods of women and vulnerable communities from the multiple impacts of extreme heat. Before that, I just mentioned it because it's relevant for our discussion today. You were the director of the Arched Rock Resilience Center, and you actually initiated the appointment of chief heat officers in cities worldwide, such as basically Athens, but also Freetown, Dhaka, as well in Bangladesh, many of them. So we do talk a lot about the impact of extreme heat on people, but less so on the economy, although of course they're linked. But you've worked extensively on this topic with a study published back in 2021, which I found was absolutely fascinating, which was called Economic and Social Consequences of Extreme Heat in the USA. So we all know that cities are economic engines. That's why we all, you know, congregate in cities to find job, basically, and work and study. We know that. But actually, heat threatens productivity and labor. So what are the key economic risks that extreme heat pose to urban economies? That would be my first question. And then the second question will go a little bit more into detail about an initiative that was actually at the origin of this event, because I found it and I thought, oh, well, that deserves an event, is that you've designed a very concrete solution to save livelihoods through a heat insurance mechanism launched at COP28 in Dubai. Would you be able to tell us a little bit more about this Women Climate Shock Insurance Initiative so that people know about it? And then hopefully we can discuss how this could apply to cities and regions, local and regional governments in their own context. Kathy, you have the floor. Thank you. You muted.
Funny. Thank you for the invitation. It's really nice to be here, and it's very nice to see Julie and Ellie, and you know, long-time colleagues. Let me start with a story of economic impact. I want to start with a story of a woman named Gita Ben. Gita Ben is a head loader in Ahmedabad, in one of the largest markets. That means that she carries bolts of fabric on her head from a wholesaler to a retailer across the market in the heat. In May of 2024, it reached 48 C in Ahmedabad. That is something like 123 in Fahrenheit. And as she is a low status worker, informal worker, she is not able to rest between jobs inside or where there's a fan or cool spaces. And so she picked up the load from her client. Once she got the signal, she put the fabric on her head, she stepped off the platform and passed out from the heat. She had a head injury and she broke her leg. And so she had to go to the doctor. She had to get an IV. She had to go into debt to pay for the IV and the cast that she had to get on her leg. She also is responsible for half of the value of the fabric that she carries on her head. That's the deal with her client. So if it's ruined, she has to pay for half of it. So she's now in debt for half of the fabric, for the IV, for the cast on her leg, and she can't work. And so she's run out of money for food. And so she's this is all about extreme heat and the economic consequences for women, and women are disproportionately impacted by extreme heat. And there are other groups also, vulnerable groups. Yes, there are, but we focus on women and their communities. And so when you think about the economic consequences, things that are happening for Geeta Ben and her sisters and colleagues all across the informal workforce, which is 92% of the Indian economy, they are experiencing a rash every single day of the year. They have blisters, they have headaches, they are losing pregnancies. They're miscarrying their babies, and 6 of our partner members lost their lives to heat in May of 2024 in our group. And so I tell that story to give the very real consequences of heat, yes, to her health and her body, but also to her income. And when women are the center of their families and in so many cases, the sole breadwinners in their families, the economic consequences are severe. And so if you take her experience, and I'm going to connect it to the parametric insurance program, because Geeta Ben was a participant in the microinsurance. And that means that heat that was so intense triggered a payout to her bank account. So she was also eligible for a cash social support that triggers at a lower level. So we know everybody is suffering from the heat, even when it's 38, 39, or 40. And then insurance is what you want for the thing that is the most, the worst of the worst. And so it triggers at a higher temperature. And so she was able to receive a cash payment for 2 days of work, and then insurance that helped her pay all the food she needed for the 3 weeks she was out. She paid most of her debts off, but a little bit. And so that program, called the Women's Climate Shock Insurance and Livelihoods Initiative, its first year insured 50,000 women across 8 trades, the 8 most heat exposed trades, with a labor union called the Self-Employed Women's Association, SEWA, and they have 3.1 million members in 18 states across India. What those trades are, think construction workers, shipbreakers are, recycling ships and breaking them apart for the recyclable material, waste recyclers from our solid waste facilities, home-based workers, farmers. And so those 50,000 of last year, 92% of those participants in the program received an insurance payout of somewhere between $7.50 and $19.80. And they are making approximately $3 a day. And what is pushing them further into poverty or back into poverty is extreme heat and flood. And so the intent was to relieve that pressure on their income and the pressure to go out and work when their health is at risk. And at great risk. And so 92% got the insurance payout, 100% got the cash payout. And this year, 225,000 women across 36 districts in 6 states are in the program. And as a part of the program, you have the cash support that triggers at a lower temperature, as I said. There's also an early warning system that is designed with the women workers. And so it's specifically created for the way that they receive information, and with specific instructions on what they can do to protect their health. And one of the biggest ideas here about thinking about cities and growing risks and impacts of heat. And we often use the word impact instead of risk, because risk is a future thing and impact is right now. And this thing is happening right now. And all the factors on that you referenced, in migration from failing farms to cities, urban informal development, housing that is hotter inside than it is outside with corrugated roofs, all the things we know that are making life hotter and more uncomfortable and affecting our health, our income, our mental health, our kids' education, all of it. But I want to say about this insurance is that it's also raising heat literacy. And so as you understand the financial aspects of your own losses and women and everybody understands that heat is affecting their income, and employers understand that it's affecting their bottom line as workers are less able to show up and crank out the usual things they crank out, and everyone suffers when that happens. And one of the biggest drivers of that is nighttime temperatures. And as we think about raising heat literacy, when you look at the average daily global temperatures, and we're focused on Paris, the Paris Accord and the 1.5 plus and staying there, which we know that we will not, but still an anchor. When you look at nighttime temperatures in cities, in certain types of air masses, and we could get into synoptic climatology, which is one of my favorite topics, what you will see is that range of temperature is jumping 3, 4, 5, 6 degrees C at night, because the diurnal range, the temperature from the difference between the temperature and the high in the day and the high in the night is getting smaller because the nights are hotter. And when you wake up the next day, you've had terrible sleep, you're tired, but your brain has not been cleaned out. Your hand-eye coordination is off. You are making mistakes, whether you are working on a computer or with clients, or you're working on a factory floor or out in the market. And so everybody suffers. And so when you think about the solution set, you asked about this insurance, it is absolutely replicable. And we are in the process of scaling the WCSI, as we refer to it, in Pakistan, in Sierra Leone, in Ghana, and Liberia. And we have a program kicking off next week in Bangkok, in Thailand. There'll be some mostly in Bangkok and then some in one of the communities in the north. And so, yes, it's replicable. And what it intends to do is not just about insurance. And that's one of the most important things about insurance as a part of a package of solutions for adapting to extreme heat and other climate impacts, is that you have to have a package. It is alone not, it is not a silver bullet. It is part of a collection of financial tools, but you also need that understanding and raising the literacy understanding of, how do I recognize the signs of heat? Do I recognize it in myself, my family, my coworkers, the people who work for me? What do I do about it? And then do I have the capacity to do it? And the beautiful thing about this work is that no one has to die. That if you have those pieces, and many don't, so it is, this is a big job, and Julie and Ellie and so many more in this field as it grows are working toward that. And one of the things I want to note is that it is a new field of practice. So while the science is advancing, the evidence base, the M&E that we need, the practical solutions, and so much of what Julie talked about is just delicious, because we all need the package of solutions, and then cities need the finance. So let me come back to finance for a minute. I want to point, and I will drop it in the chat, to an adaptation finance primer that Climate Resilience for All and Tailwind Climate produced together, that is intended for practitioners. It's not a taxonomy. It's not a playbook. It is just what it says, a primer. Everyone, everywhere in a city planning for communities, cities, regions, states, countries will need the basic information about how to fund and finance these types of projects. Some of them short-term, some of them long-term. There's a lot of data needs. Some very exciting announcements were made at the Global Health Assembly I guess this is this week, last week. So the world is tuned in, but the key thing is that as the solutions come into frame, we also need the money. And where does the money come from? And the primer is intended to show a full account of the contents of a capital stack, which just means where the money comes from, including household income. And so when you think about this insurance, where 225,000 women, they have themselves paid 40% of the premium. And so as they build their understanding of how an insurance works, how the cash works, how to plan for what they buy, when they have good early warning, they buy fewer fruits and vegetables if they don't have access to cooling. They're managing their heat risk by hedging. And if they have good weather data, they understand I'm going to buy fewer things, whether that's for my household or for my business, because it will go bad. And so, thinking about what are the strategies for cities, understanding the nighttime temperatures, understanding the hits on worker productivity, and just for a couple of little pearls to put in your pocket, Bangkok loses 8% of its GDP to heat and worker productivity because of the motorbike economy. So all the goods and the people and the stuff moving on motorbikes and the people driving them, the heat is knocking them down 8% of the GDP. You referenced the report we did in 21, that now to the US economy is 200 billion per year, and 18% or more of that impact is disproportionately borne by Black and Hispanic workers in the south of the US. A worker in New Delhi loses a quarter of their income every day they work outside. So we're beginning to get the numbers we need. And then the next step is that employers and governments understand the relationship between the investments in the interventions that they apply and the cost benefit analysis of doing that. And so if you're protecting the health and livelihoods of either your residents and citizens or your employees, what is the benefit to you, financially, and then the multiple co-benefits and the list of solutions is great, as both Ellie and Julie showed. Nature-based solutions, early warning systems, built environment adaptations, financial supports, urban search and rescue for notifying seniors before, when it's time to go, cooling stations and community centers, and, I could go on and on. So I'll stop there. But your two questions are, key economic risk, big one, it's melting our economies, truly melting them. And there are solutions, and we're getting more sophisticated at the ability to assess the cost benefit analysis of investing in those solutions at scale.
Thank you so much, Kathy. Let me just follow up with one question. It burns me that, is that then the right
No pun
narrative?
intended.
Is that the right narrative to use then? Is that the economic narrative that we need to use to make sure that all governments at all levels basically take, huge, big, daring measures to fight extreme heat? Is that, most effective in terms of making sure that they don't do nothing? Or because, the question about extreme heat has been increasing, but it feels like, yes, there are things that are being done, definitely in Athens and maybe other cities, but overall, it's not,
Yeah.
Is it a big priority?
No, it is not. I mean, it's invisible, silent impact, but it's not. I mean, this is the thing. I mean, the insurance industry is focused on assets. And so heat is the big driver for heat is the human body. And, I would make a relationship to female leadership and prioritization of heat. When 50% of the world's leaders are female, yes, I think it would be a priority, because women leaders better see the whole picture of the co-benefits that come with investing in it. But to answer your question, in the world we have now, in the direction our politics and democratic institutions are going, the economy is the message. It is the way to drive awareness and understanding, and the science and the quantification of the impacts and the economic impacts, the benefits are getting better and better. And so I think the tools are coming into place. And in the meantime, it's a humanitarian crisis, it's a city crisis, and very soon it hits the bottom line of companies, and cities are feeling it now. So yes, and yes.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Let me now, are there questions? And sorry, are there some comments and questions in the Q&A, Simone, who's behind there's a very technical one. If one of the panelists feel like they can answer, I would ask you to do so. Otherwise, let me ask you, Julie, just wanted to go back to you. But before doing that, sorry, I just wanted to mention that the UN Secretary General had made a call to action on extreme heat, basically, that you probably are aware of. last year. It was July 2024. I wanted to ask, I'm not sure if our colleague from UNEP, UN Environment Program, are here. They wanted to present what the UN system had been doing. Yes? There is? Yes. Gulnara, if you are with us, please raise your hand. If not, let me also ask colleagues from UNDRR if they are around. Sanjaya, are you around? Also, because UNDRR has very recently released an urban extreme heat risk management resource package that might be useful basically for cities and regions to use. No, they're not. Okay, all right. So let's move back to you, Julie. I have one question. How do we measure success in heat resilience? What indicators matter most from your point of view?
Yeah, thanks. So I think, the most simplest version of that answer is success is that you have happy and healthy city residents, right? And there's a huge number of indicators that have to go into figuring out how you get there, of course. So interestingly, actually, for this question, a partnership that the Red Cross is involved in, it's called the Zurich Flood Resilience Alliance. They're now also working on heat, but funded by the Zurich Foundation, funded a paper actually just on this that got released last year. So I can drop that into the chat. But things that are worth considering there, of course, life and health. So are we seeing measurable decreases in the people who are dying from extreme heat? To get there, you also need to improve surveillance in many places, but also well-being indicators, livelihood indicators, along the lines of what Kathy was describing, for example. The system resilience in a city, your utilities, are they resilient? Are your health system resilient? Can they expand and contract based on demands? Then individual risk awareness, I think, is really key because that's sort of a foundation to be able to take larger actions. Worker protections, I would mention again as well. Education, days missed from school, for example, are those numbers, what are those numbers as baseline? Are they going down? Household level adaptations, especially looking at indoor heat risk. Maybe even looking at, for example, local ordinances and protections that can improve some of these household level considerations. For example, the city of Phoenix has a local ordinance that they passed recently, I think it was last year maybe, that requires cooling for rental properties, which is a great local ordinance to have to make sure that indoor heat risk is managed. So those are a few to keep it brief. And I'll drop that paper that was done by colleagues in the chat as well for those that might be interested in it.
Thanks a lot. A lot of them then indicators in all sectors of society, and we see how basically extreme heat impacts the whole society. Can I also ask you to tell us about the most promising and most innovative heat risk reduction measures that you've seen, along your 2 decades that might be replicable? Again, we always look at, things that might be replicated in other contexts. Yeah. What have you seen that is kind of promising?
Yeah, I think, well, one, for example, is this great increase we've seen in looking at cool spaces in the city, right? And some examples were already given about that from Athens. The sort of increase of green and blue infrastructure and this sort of idea of a network of cool spaces that people can access in easy proximity. Another one of my favorites, I have quite a few, but is looking at how early warning systems can be paired with civil society action. So for example, these are 2 Red Cross examples. In Australia, there's a program called Telecross Ready, and there's a similar program in Spain. And basically that program, when extreme heat, although the Australia one is also broader for multiple disasters that started with extreme heat, when extreme heat is in effect, let's say, this program is where volunteers, in this case from the Red Cross, but it could be from any organization really, call those who are most vulnerable. So they've pre-registered for this hotline. And people just check on them, ask them how they're doing. They're sort of checking for signs of confusion or distress, but they're doing this daily check-in. And then if there are signs of distress, they will send emergency services. So what I really like about that is it is scalable across contexts. You could imagine a similar telephone-based system, even in lower income settings, or maybe community-based health workers are called to go and check on people who are showing signs of distress. But it's also targeting those who are sort of highly vulnerable, in this case, older individuals in particular. Another couple of interesting ones. So in a few cities, we see the rise of coalition building around extreme heat and other types of disasters. And this is really, again, bringing together the local government as chair of that coalition, but bringing in local universities or civil society partners, faith-based organizations, private sector, et cetera. And so there are examples of this across Honduras, a city called Choluteca, Tanga and Unguja in Tanzania, Surabaya in Indonesia, a variety of different locations. It's really a low-cost way to bring together the city resources and create this sort of joint effort to advance heat action. And then I guess the last one of many that I could cite that I also find really interesting, this is an example from the US, and it may not translate to every city, but it will certainly translate to many. So we have this concept of cooling centers, right, where people can go during the day to cool off and then they can go home. But we also know that the difficulty of getting to these locations can also be a barrier. So in the Pacific Northwest heat wave in 2021, they sort of tested with opening what I would call cooling shelters, which basically you can go to that location, you can stay overnight for the duration of the heat wave. And they found that in that location, and unfortunately there's not a paper or a study written up on it, this is very anecdotal, but in that location, they had hundreds of people in the overnight shelter and almost no one in the cooling centers. And I think that speaks to sort of removing some of those barriers that people have to be able to access cool spaces, which could be the transport back and forth, or the sort of a barrier of leaving your house. And so I think that's a really cool one that I'd love to see more places picking up as well.
Thanks, Julie. Super concrete. Thanks a lot for that. There's a question on the chat for you, Kathy. And actually, it's good that the person raises this question, because I wanted to ask you this question earlier. And it's from Marcella, who asked about how basically the insurance scheme is financed. As you said earlier, 40% of it is funded by people themselves, you know, put there as an insurance premium. And how is the rest funded? And again, sorry, how could, again, local and regional governments be involved in that if they can, in terms of funding?
Well, yes, of course. And we will be releasing a guide on how to do this, you know, in the coming months. But in essence, you need insurable interest, and you know, we could do an hour and 15 minutes on the insurance itself and how insurance works in this context. But the short answer is that philanthropy, Climate Resilience for All, is partnered with the Self-Employed Women's Association. Swiss Re is the reinsurer and the structurer, modeler, pricing the insurance, and ICICI Lombard is a cedent, the local insurer in India. And we work together to figure out where the triggers are and price and design the insurance, with Climate Resilience for All as the architect of the whole program. And we raised from philanthropy 60%, the women paid 40%, and Swiss Re in kind did the work to build the insurance design, structure, price, place, etc. So that's this particular this particular program, but they're quite flexible. And then also we've got a journal article about this program coming out that will break this down a bit in the Cities Climate Journal of C40 and the University of Toronto, which comes out any moment. So when it does, I'll share that with you on, we can put it in. I can't quite put it in the chat, but soon. So we'll have some explication of all of this. And then we also have a WCSI page on Climate Resilience for All's website, and that is climateresilience.org.
Excellent. Thanks for that. We'll make sure to follow up on that. We can also publish easily in news or on social media when this article comes out, you know, so that people get a little bit more in-depth understanding of how this insurance mechanism works. I'm also interested about what you said earlier, Kathy, about, sorry, I'm trying to find the
Early
prime,
warning
the primer document. I think it would
yeah.
be particularly useful for cities and regions to basically better understand where they can, how they can fund basically a climate, adaptation, climate mitigation in their own cities. So
And can I just put let me just put two quick points in there. When I say the expanded capital stack, what I mean is the household income, which is the 40% that the women contributed. It's also loss and damage. There are countries making pledges of loss and damage funding, and they're out there putting money into projects. And so while a commercial investor will not want to talk about loss and damage as a source of capital, it is a source of capital. You'll have to also think about your local revenues and disaster risk financing pieces. And you didn't ask me this, but I want to answer it anyway. What's the big thing that we need to, what's the big lever we have? And it's forecast-based financing and forecast-based insurance. We've got 2% of disasters financed in advance, and 67% of them are predictable or predicted. Maybe that number has grown, but the point is we're missing a big opportunity. And just in the conversations we have with our community organizations and the women we work with in South Asia, we know that if they had money in advance, it would be game changing in the way that they manage themselves, their families, their income, their finances, all of that stuff. So huge lever. And that involves some regulatory work we need to do with the insurance regulators, which is underway.
Great.
And my colleague, Lori Gehring, who's our extreme heat editor, has just dropped the finance primer link into the chat. Thank you, Lori.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. Elizabeth, can I go back to you about how you mainstream climate issues in Athens? It was very interesting because last year we had Dhaka, the chief heat officer from Dhaka in Bangladesh, and she told us about how difficult it was to mainstream basically her file, her priorities, which is of course beating the heat in Dhaka, and how it was a nightmare to collaborate with different departments, be it at city level, but also at national level, regional level. And you mentioned this at the very beginning in your presentation, that collaboration is very important. But so is it, have you managed to really mainstream climate everywhere where you can? Or you still face resistance, people from the roads, say, well, this has nothing to do with me, basically. So, that's what we heard from Dhaka. So I wanted to test it out with you.
It's a reality that a lot of cities face or have faced in the past. I'm quite happy to say that in the city of Athens, since we've done, this is our third climate action plan for climate neutrality. Sorry, just a moment, please.
No worries.
Okay, so we've done 3 climate action plans, 1 resilience strategy, and we do a lot of working with cross-departmental collaboration inside the city, and also stakeholder engagement and residents engagement in various projects that we do. I don't think we do see things horizontally. So for us, through experience and through time and many projects, we are overcoming that. But we try to, because climate in general and resilience is something that is built in now into the system, is building in. It's not 100%, but we are in a good way. We are introducing more climate principles, more resilience principles in our strategies, in our indicators, in our projects. So this has become easier through the years with a lot of work.
I'm sure about it.
That cannot be seen.
There's a question on the chat for you, Elizabeth, and it's a very relevant question. We mentioned creating an app, basically renovating a Roman aqueduct. building pocket parks a little bit everywhere in the city, and other issues that you have mentioned. All of them sound good, but they are expensive, take a long time, need a lot of collaboration. So the question is there a low cost, no fail, super easy and quick solution to urban heat reduction? Do you have a magic formula for that?
No, there's no magic formula for that. Unfortunately.
But I guess the question is, in cities that probably have less means than Athens, where, they're starting to build in, resilience to heat, what is the low-hanging fruit out there to start with?
I think everything that a city does has to have maintenance as well. I don't think the expensive part of a project is the capital. I think it's for a city to continue doing what they're doing is very, very important. And that's something that we need to consider. For everything that we do, we need to think as public officials how to see it in the future and how this will continue, and get funding for the maintenance as well, not just building the project.
Okay, so doing what they do already by building in, like this thought about
into existing. I think that the answer is incorporate into existing projects and build in. So to make it viable, to make it sustainable.
Yeah. Introduce the heat factor into what exists at the moment, basically everywhere, mainstreaming again. Yep, great. Tell us about, do we still have time? Yes, a few more minutes. Do you work with other cities, basically, on this issue as Athens? Do you collaborate? Do you exchange good practices? Do you,
We do. We've been part of a lot of city networks. We were part of C40 network. We are one of the lead city for the Cool Cities network of C40, for example. We work with ICLE, with a lot of networks, and we do have meetings and webinars. We exchange experiences, practices, and it's a great source of information and education for all of us. And we try a lot of things that we give our experience, and they also do the same to us. I think it's a very constructive way of building up the heat concept into the cities and introducing it.
Could I add to that?
Oh, it's Kathy, sorry. Who wanted to take the floor? Is it Kathy?
Yeah, yes, please.
Please do.
Just quick minute here. I wanted to point out that Mayor Yvonne Aki-Sawyer, who is the co-chair of C40, also on the board of Climate Resilience for All, and of course Eugenia Cargbo, Chief Heat Officer, is our senior heat strategist for CRA for Africa. We co-hosted a heat summit and featured the heat action plan of Freetown. It was officially adopted by the vice president of Sierra Leone, and many mayors from the region were invited. And those types of opportunities where mayors have the high-level interaction and still an understanding of what's happening in the city, including the head of the market women of the biggest market, the Congo market in Freetown, came and spoke about the experience that the market traders have in the heat and what's happening with the products they're selling, and managing their inventory and their health. And it was moving for one, and also eye-opening for leaders who live in a policy world that's at a distance from the lived experience of a lot of women and people living, below the poverty line. And it was so effective. And so I just want to point out, we'll be sharing some expanded city participation as a result of that summit. And so those types of things that are hosted by these networks or by groups like ours or the Climate Center, they're effective and can really help create the confidence and trust, because that's, Ellie just said it, the challenge is really the human beings that run these things and to stick with them. Anyway, yes, those can be effective, and other cities trust other cities' leaders.
Thank you. And I may add that, you know, when you say that national leaders are sometimes have a bit of a distance sometimes with the issues, that's why we have been investing so much into cities and local governments who are normally much closer to their people and understand basically those issues. Last point, I want to give the floor to Julie because you had a suggestion on the low-hanging fruit thing. Is that it?
Yeah.
And then also, Julie, since you have the floor, there's a question from Laurie about what cities do you see creating new heat plans now or doing especially interesting work on heat risk, given that you have a bit of an overview there. If you can mention a few interesting examples. Thank you.
Sure. So on the low cost, sort of easy, quick solutions, I think one of the really key ones to get started, if you're looking in that sort of low resource environment, is to start building partnerships with others outside of government. So government with others, right? And so this comes back to the coalition building piece that I mentioned as an example from a bit earlier, but when you can build these coalitions, and we've seen this work in cities of all shapes and sizes and resource levels, you start to be able to bring in partners who can bring their core strongest added value to the solution. And when you have these, when you're able to convene partners and bring them together, and you can start stitching together these core added values, then you can also sort of grow and continue to expand from there. And coalition building can be very easy. It's not something that is resource intensive. It can be inviting people to your office to have a meeting and talk about this extreme heat challenge. And, you know, are they working on it? Do they want to work on it? What could they do in their capacity? And however small or large that capacity is, it still builds out this bigger picture of how you can grow your heat action. And so I would really recommend this. And you think of in those partners, you know, invite your local media partners because they can get the message out, right? Or invite your local academic partners because they can help you understand the academic sort of evidence base. Invite your local community groups because they can give you more of that either indigenous knowledge or local knowledge into that perspective. Invite your Red Cross because there's probably one in your town or city, and they can talk about volunteers and disaster management risk. And so coalition building is what I would really emphasize there as a way to get started. And then to the cities creating heat plans, I just in the interest of time, I'll maybe mention one that we see a lot of growing activity on heat action planning in Nepal, which is really exciting. So Nepal Ganj is a smaller city that has been leading the way on that work, and it's expanded now into many cities. And so it's fantastic.
So which one? Can you repeat?
Nepal Ganj is the city in the Terai, and so they've been for a couple of years now building out their heat plans, and we see many other smaller cities in the Terai sort of building and growing and following that model of building out heat action plans. So that's one quick one where there's a lot of interesting work going on at the moment.
Excellent. Apart from Athens, of course, that we've heard from. Thank you so much. Are there other questions and comments in the chat or not? Simone, no, none of them. Do you want, we have 2 more minutes. Do you want any additional time for final remarks? Any of the panelists? Kathy, do you want to say something to close it?
Always. Yes, thank you. You know, time is time to share and, you know, connect with others. So what I would say is the low-hanging fruit is quality early warning systems that are reaching people in the channels of information they trust. And so my particular bent, it's not just me, it's the science also, is that health-based warning systems are the most effective and accurate. And that means you have to have mortality data. That is a challenge in lots of places in the world. So I'd also just like to make one little point. Julie, you referenced this about data. You know, if you think that we think about us having an insurance based on a data source that tells us it's a certain temperature, whether that's the Indian Met Service or NASA power data or ERA 5 data, all these different data sets, and some are modeled and some are satellites and some are, you know, real time. The point is the weather station for the IMD data can be 50 kilometers away from the woman who is waiting for insurance to come, and she's standing on black asphalt, and she, you know, women are physically disproportionately experiencing heat from men because of our hormone fluctuations, our heart, our physiological differences. And so that is a challenge. And we would love to have better calibrated financial products to support people with data that is actually supporting them where they are. And so the Mittal South Asia Center and Dr. Sachi Balsari are experimenting with wearables. And so that data, we're collecting data on the experience of the body temperature of the woman on real time where she or he, whoever's wearing the wearable, is. And so just foreshadowing some technologies that are going to help us have better calibrated financial products and early warning systems. But let me go back. Ellie mentioned this, that starting with the National Observatory of Athens, we experimented with our science team and showed that health-based warning systems are really effective, and you can predict the increase of all-cause mortality of a specific community, given what you know about their health and mortality and a particular heat event. So you can say, we expect a 25% increase in the all-cause mortality on Friday and Saturday. And that would mean that X number more in your community are going to die from heat. Don't let it be you. Do these things. Don't die. Take action, understand it. And so the health-based warning system and the state of California is just rolling out Cal Heat Score. And so that same methodology is being rolled out to 60 million Americans. So lots of low-hanging fruit, and early warning systems are at the top of the list.
Thank you so much, Kathy, about putting so much emphasis on the data, actually, that we did mention throughout the event. Elizabeth, any last words before we close? Ooh, we don't hear you.
Yes, sorry. Yes, I'd like to compliment on what Kathy and Julie have said about that data. A city cannot have policies if they don't have data. That's very important for cities. It's very important for our collaborators. And if there is an initial, if a city does not have enough and accurate data in order to combat any issues in the city, and if they, like the heat, for example, they need to start collecting and collaborating for having data-driven strategies. It's very, very important. And that's how you become a credible city as well. And you get collaborators in that sense. For example, from 2017, with the data we collected, we saw that the places that are the most heat vulnerable places, the hottest areas in the city of Athens, coincide with the parts of the city that have the most heat vulnerable populations and the lack of green spaces. That's a major.
Makes sense.
Major conclusion to make for city officials and get your power in the correct direction.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I like what you said about becoming a credible city. Julie, any last word, and then we'll close the event.
Yeah, well, if you're already working on extreme heat, which I imagine many are, get the message out about the cool work that you're doing to inspire others. And then if you're by chance dialing in because you're just coming to this topic, jump straight in, don't be intimidated, and join the rest of us because we have a lot to do, but a lot of interesting things going on in this space as well. And thanks so much for organizing, Zan.
Thank you to the 3 fantastic women leaders that took part in this event. I hope that was short, Chris, but you got a lot of information about, what is being done to basically beat the heat in cities. I thank you again, and I also thank our participants. We will follow up with probably a little bit more information by email, to provide you with all the web links and the different programs, initiatives that have been mentioned. But I thank you, and I wish you a great Heat Action Day on the 2nd of June that is really going to take place worldwide. A lot of different initiatives will occur on that day. So have a look at the city, sorry, it's not city, it's Heat Action Day webpage that is hosted at the IFRC. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.